I'm coming to see. I go through there.
Yeah, figure out where we'll sit there to get on the camera.
I want to get on the camera.
You don't want to get on the camera.
I don't want to be that big on the camera.
You should be able to copies too, if anybody wants one. Funny balls.
And if you need anything, just send me a Teams message, okay?
I'll do it.
Yeah, Juliana, I'm just about past that way, so. 12 in January. So I don't know what time it is.
No.
I don't know.
Good.
No.
It's another one, right now.
We're getting a lot of feedback. Do you think it's because that monitor has us on volume as well?
That feedback on now,
I started feeding the other day.
Yes, much better. Thank you.
but now we can't hear you.
Now we can't hear you.
Yeah. Less run hard. Yeah.
That shouldn't stop us, right? Yeah, we won't hear if we're muted.
That's okay.
Is it still bad now?
Try it one more time.
That's 1, 2, 3.
That's good.
Right.
Yeah, he keeps saying, oh, that was a breakfast. So, she- Yeah, she did. Everything is right.
And my share screen looks like it's working, huh, Doug?
Yep, I can see it.
Okay, great.
Yes.
No.
That's 5 years. But it just gets hard to see there. It's like, how much would you have a simple? Tell them about that. It's like, well, I have a big one. And the other so.
We got saw solar, something still up a month.
National voice. It's coming in. Upgrade. Now. Start to come out. Yeah. Four. I know. Carlson first grade and. Mark what? Yeah. Oh. Something and. Carl made sure he did it. Yeah, no, so. He didn't get it up. He didn't get it, but he registered it. No.
So it's.
You just wanted to. Better. I got some was when close to summer last, I know previous summer, but for some before, you know, they're not trying to keep it, but it's, you know. Talk about maybe girls, like, a little fly, you know. Wow. Yeah, no, but I really like it. When I come here, I thought my cat coming into one. They did okay. Well, the reason I gave is the virus. I had no shaping of the movie seemed pretty sure it was yeah, but we have and we got a source check on the Midwest. Why? And a bunch of as much as you could kind of around it.
Yeah.
I got her, but I heard. Yeah, I would get it, you know.
Well, we've been running.
No, yeah. Oh, that's, yeah. And I circled down. No. But we're down like 5 walls. Yeah. Yeah, the trouble is that sometimes there's never finding by. You know, the dogs, the next one, we down in the morning. The dogs can stay. No, they practice. So they get. There's nothing there, doesn't. So then.
Good.
Okay, I guess we're both on if you sit down there.
Here's the most following.
Figure out how we need to go with this.
I don't know why I.
Just sit next to me, Doug.
Well, I figured that. But
We don't, right? Thank you all the time. You know.
I'm gonna read off my old notes.
Okay, so you don't need that one.
Well, I might.
You have a copy?
The other night. I'm just fine. I did find one. Well, this one is a Snyder pen, so. I'm finding a pen. Oh.
That works, you can see both things. Give me those 6 and
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Are you good, Julia?
I'm good. Are you ready for me to mute the other office sites? We haven't had anyone show up.
Nobody in Las Vegas or Sparks?
No,
Okay.
or Elko.
Okay. Do you have any online?
Yes, what, Mr. Burrows is there, and of course we have Sam.
Okay. All right, you good? Let me know when you're ready and I'll start doing it.
All right, we're recording. You can go.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for being here today. It is 1:05 p.m. on Tuesday, November 29th, 2022, and this is the scheduled time for the workshop regarding proposed changes to Chapter 571 of Nevada Administrative Code, NAC. This workshop is being held in person at the Nevada Department of Agriculture, Churchill County 3C Arena at 325 Sheckler Road in Fallon, Nevada, as well as virtually via Zoom, either using computer or telephone to ensure all wishing to participate may do so. This workshop has been properly noticed and is being recorded as required by Nevada open meeting law. My name is Doug Ferris, and I'm the Division Administrator of the Animal Industry for the Nevada Department of Agriculture. We also have the following staff members from the Nevada Department of Agriculture with us today. We have Julia Miller Ketchum, Samantha Bellwood, Dr. Keith Forbes, and Dr. JJ Goycochea. With that, Julia, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, I will share my screen. So a few housekeeping items. We will be using some of the features of Zoom for those who have joined us through the platform. At the bottom right of your screen, you'll see participants and chat. Click on these to open the boxes. Next, locate the participants icon and click to open. Find your name on the participant list and hover over your name. A raise hand icon will appear if you wish to speak. This is what you'll click so that we know to call on you. Click it again to lower your hand after speaking or to withdraw the request. If you don't find the hand by hovering over your name, use the three dots in the bottom of the screen to open a menu where you'll have the option of raising and lowering your hand. We have muted everyone to reduce background noise. If you wish to give public comment, please use the hand raising feature and ensure your mic is unmuted, and we'll call on you. For those participating via phone, you can raise your hand using the public comment periods or the question period by pressing *9. You can unmute yourself when called upon by pressing *6. If you have any technical issues during the meeting, try the following. Turn the video off to see if the connection improves. Leave the video meeting and either try to rejoin or call in using the phone number and login information from the agenda. If you are having problems getting unmuted or into the comment queue, use the chat function to make your comment and it will be recorded for the record. In addition to public comments, during this workshop, interested parties are welcome to submit written public comment and email to animalindustry@agri.nv.gov. Since there is no sign-in sheet for the online options, we'll be using the participant list. If we're unsure of your name, we may send you a chat so we have the correct information in the meeting minutes. If you're joining us via phone, please send an email to animalindustry@agri.nv.gov indicating that you participated in today's workshop, or remain on the line after we close so that we can capture your information. From our agenda, you'll see that we're going to start with a period of open comment for anyone wishing to speak or on concerns or to provide feedback. We ask that you limit those comments to 3 minutes to ensure that everyone can be heard and save questions for the next portion of the meeting. Following open comment, we will review the proposed changes to NAC 571, followed by time for input, questions, and clarification. After questions, there will be another period for additional public comment on the workshop hearing. Those who wish to speak during the public comment are requested to use the hand raising feature, and when called upon, identify themselves by name and any affiliation for the record. Again, please save your questions for after public comment at the conclusion of the review of the proposed changes. There will be time for questions and dialogue at that point, once all information has been shared before we move into the next round of public comment. At this time, we will open for general public comment.
Julia, just before we start that, I'd like to add one more thing.
Sure.
So in introducing members from Nevada Department of Agriculture, we also have the chairman of the Department of Agriculture Board, Woody Worthington, is here today as long with us.
Thank you.
And then go ahead then.
Okay, so we will open up for public comment. I am not seeing anything in chat or any hands raised on my side.
Okay, we do have one here, Julia.
Okay,
Yeah.
Is that okay?
Yeah, I think you can do it from there. It's just not on the screen is all we have.
Okay. Wait, Nevada livestock is landlocked by connectivity states with strong mandatory trichinosis laws and regulations. These states have eradicated this venereal disease. It can be eradicated in Nevada within 2 to 3 years, as our neighboring states have with the mandatory trick test by all breeding rules. The state vet with the positive trick result would notify the bull owners and all connecting neighbors, ranches, and farms, and post that information to the Nevada State Lab website with name and owner, ranch name, address, and contact info to the ranch with trick bulls and date. The website would be a public knowledge. Also, the sheep industry would test all breeding grounds and post venereal positive diseases of the herd with ranch owner, address, and contact info and date of possible tests. Nevada Department of Ag would post and quarantine in beef and sheep herds until the diseased animals were treated or destroyed. All sale yards would be notified of the website and notified of the herd held in quarantine until otherwise notified. Animals could not be sold. Thank you.
And can you state your name as well for the record?
I'm sorry. Leanna and Carrie.
Then we have another one, Julia, if you're ready.
I am.
Go ahead.
For the record, I'm Doug Busselman. I'm the Executive Vice President of Nevada Farm Bureau. I want to open by saying that we greatly appreciate the conversations that have been held in Winnemucca and Yelko. We also greatly appreciate having had the recording that we were able to review and to go over those sessions that you had and look at it on the website. We found that those recordings were very useful, and we greatly appreciated them being available. Based on what we've watched in the past workshops and what we believe will come from today's session, we still maintain that cattle producers from across the state need to have the same opportunity to participate through in-person workshops in their area of the state. We have earlier suggested that these additional workshop sessions be held in Tonopah and in Ely. That proposal is based on the number of producers in the central part of the state and even going into Lincoln County who will be impacted by those proposed changes and who should be given the opportunity to give their input. At this point, we've been focusing our comments and observations on the current trick regulations and how they might be enhanced to work better, as opposed to going all the way along the proposed language that's included in the package of the proposed regulation. We believe that the existing regulations could be improved and made more effective while continuing without mandatory testing of all bulls on a statewide and annual basis. We also want to express our agreement in the conversations that have taken place to this point with the idea that you have proposed of moving to 18 months for the eligible full test. Thank you.
Thank you.
I still do not see any hands raised on this side of things.
Okay, we're gonna have another one here. I don't know.
Perfect.
Let me know if you can hear her well, Julia.
Okay,
Go ahead.
I am Jennifer Garrett, and I am against mandatory annual trick testing. Enforcement of annual trick testing is part of all producers and much harder and labor intensive than the current regulations are to enforce. The department has explained that it now has a database of producers' names that they can just check off when each ranch's trick results come in. This will take a person's time that is now not needed now. The department that is very much in need of employees and therefore is very stretched just to cover their current duties. Also, that person that checks off that they received the test results has to compare it to the tax number being reported. If only 25 polls are tested and the tax rolls report shows that they have 45 polls, then the department will have to have a person research this discrepancy. He or she will also not have to research the producers that no test results have been received from. The producers who don't comply will have to be contacted, etc., and be told their brand is going to be taken away and enforcement done. Currently, the department has to enforce regulations concerning only negative test results, which involve fewer producers, versus having to enforce regulations for all producers across the state. Mandatory annual trick testing will cause a much greater burden involving time and labor on a department that is very short-handed already and therefore struggling to complete all the tasks that are now required. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment in Fallon? Not seeing any other here, Julia.
okay, nothing here either. So I guess we'll turn it over to Dr. Goycochea.
All right, so what we're gonna do is I'm gonna step through proposed changes. Some of us have heard this, and Mr. Busman has seen it online as well. I apologize if I go fast through some sections. We're starting to recite these in our sleep. Just a little reminder, it's not all trick. So there are some other very important changes that we're going to talk about. It just happens that the way that the reg is written, trick is at the end of this regulation. So we'll get started on the front page under general provisions. You'll notice health certificate. We're changing that to certificate of veterinary inspection. That is just to kind of keep up with the times. That's what those are called rather than health papers or CBIs. Then we've got some nomenclature. I've made this joke twice. So I'm going to be consistent. I'll do it again. We change the name of trick every so many years because the science nerds need something to do. And by the time we get this passed, we'll probably change it again. So, but I will not read that everywhere we go through. That is just a nomenclature, as you'll see all the way down through that in definitions. So we'll get started. NAC 571-010, certificate of veterinary inspection. That means an official document that records health status, origin, destination, and identification of an animal that is issued by licensed veterinarian, is accredited by USDA, APHIS, VS in accordance with 9 CFR Part 161. A CVI as approved by the department in accordance with, again, 9 CFR Part 161. So it won't necessarily be a health paper. We are moving into a digital area in that as well. 571-020, just some cleanup stuff. We still had Capitol Hill address and Reno and the old phone number. Horses, mules, and asses, NAC 571-030. Except as otherwise provided, subsection 2 reacts negatively to a test approved by the department. And that'll allow us flexibility in the future as new test modalities come on. Sheep, certificate of veterinary inspection that includes a statement by the issuing veterinarian approved by the department and consistent with current federal scraping program requirements, indicating that the animals in the shipment are not suspects, showing signs of clinical illness, or originating from an exposed, infected source or non-compliant flock. That deals strictly with scraping. Sub 2, for a breeding animal, the flock of birth of the sheep and or similar identification as required by the department. We know that may not be the case. You may not know exactly where those had originated from, so we can make those requirements. Just changing the number to 3. All breeding rams that are 6 months of age or older are tested for B. ovis, Brucella ovis, on a test approved by the department. While we're currently using enzyme link assay and ELISA test at Western Slope, but we're hoping that maybe we get some new testing in the future for that. We want to be flexible. 571.040, you'll notice health certificate changes to be veterinary inspection. This is important here. All female cattle and bison that are 12 months of age or older bear a legible official tattoo and associated official ID or official 840 EID vaccination tag as evidence of official brucellosis calf foot vaccination. We're all aware that they got to have a tattoo the way it is right now, or they're not considered official calf foot if you're selling those breeding animals. This will allow us to not have to stop those animals and look for that tattoo. If they have an official 840 vaccination tag in, that will work, and that should speed up commerce and stop the trips to the chute on some of these cows. Sub 1, all sexually intact cattle of any age moving from the DSA, which is designated surveillance area, unless approved by the department based on seasonal grazing. Designated surveillance area is in Montana, Wyoming, and Idaho, surrounding the greater Yellowstone area. That's the last known vestige of brucellosis in the United States. Sub 2, all sexually intact bison. 3, any cattle or bison originating from a state or herd not listed as brucellosis 3 or brucellosis status may present an increased disease risk as determined by the department. D, cattle and bison react negatively to a test for tuberculosis as follows. Within 30 days prior to entry into Nevada, all sexually intact dairy cattle 6 months of age or older. Those are current federal guidelines, and those aren't, we're just bringing those up. All bison 6 months of age or older. Any cattle or bison originating from a state or herd not listed as TB free or where that livestock may present an increased disease risk as determined by the department. Sub 2, within 12 months before entry into Nevada, all sexually intact cattle 12 months of age or older entering Nevada for events, rodeos, shows, or exhibitions. All cattle originating from Mexico shall be branded with the letter M on the upper right hip or similar permanent brand as approved by the department and consistent with current USDA requirements. Sub 3, all Mexican origin cattle used in roping, rodeo, exhibition, sporting, or similar timed events shall be tested for brucellosis on an annual basis after entry into the United States. Testing records shall be in the possession of any owner, manager, agent, or representative in possession of these cattle at all times. Testing records shall include all official ID numbers which coincide with the Mexican origin cattle in possession. Official Mexico ID ear tags must be retained after entry into the United States. Official ID must be individually listed on the CBI for all Mexican origin cattle of any age. Only steers and spayed heifers may be imported into Nevada. Mexican origin cattle must not be co-pastured or commingled with any other tuberculosis susceptible livestock. Game, fur, herring, and wild animals. We struck areas here. These are no longer needed in our regs due to some statutory changes we did 3 sessions ago now, I believe, at the legislature. So those are in statute. NAC 571.080. Sub 2, a dogger calf that is 12 weeks of age. That just brings it into line with the current compendium. And then we have a hyperlink to that compendium so people can refer to that. Transportation of livestock stops for inspection, possession of health certificates. We will change that to CBI. Every time we go through this, we find one more. Sub 2, except as otherwise provided in subsection 3, a person who is transporting livestock shall carry health certificates. That'll be CBI. For the livestock, the CBI must have been issued within the previous 30 days as directed by the department. Following livestock are not required to have CBI's livestock being transported only within Nevada unless directed otherwise as indicated by a hold or quarantine order issued by the department. So I want to stop right here just for a second. Doug and I were talking about this earlier today. Nowhere in our terminology do we actually have hold order defined, only quarantine order. So I imagine you will see a change in that, and we will just be using quarantine order. going forward throughout, because we do not have hold order anywhere defined that we can hang our hat on. 571-100 livestock for use in rodeos. A person shall not ship, transport, or otherwise move livestock into Nevada for use in a rodeo, roping, exhibition, sporting, or similar timed event unless each animal is accompanied by a CBI and an entry permit. The following cattle and bison react negatively for brucellosis within 30 days. Sexually intact cattle of any age moving from the DSA unless approved by the administrator. All bison 6 months of age or older. Any cattle or bison originating from a herd or location that is not brucellosis free or presents an increased disease risk as determined by the department, including the designated surveillance area. Any cattle or bison originating from a herd or location that is not tuberculosis free or presents an increased risk by the department within 12 months before entering Nevada. All sexually intact cattle and bison 12 months of age or older, all roping steers, and all Mexican origin cattle. Livestock for sale, shows, fairs, or other public exhibition, public livestock auctions that hold a current federally approved agreement may have additional provisions allowed for animal entry as detailed in that agreement and approved by the department. So what that means is if they're federally approved, we enter an agreement with them now. The 2 sale barns in Nevada have agreements and they have different requirements that are outlined in here per that agreement. And those are subject to change upon renewal, or if there are violations, then we can go in there and make some changes. 571-120 quarantine imposed if no certificate or permit issued. Animals or livestock entering the state of Nevada without a valid certificate, a veterinary inspection or other approved certificate and a permit, if required, shall be held in quarantine at the risk and expense of the owner. NAC 571-130, emergency importation of livestock. In the event of natural disaster, fire, or similar emergency evacuation incident, the department may temporarily waive entry permit requirements and allow the approved shipment to be imported into Nevada. All animals in the shipment must travel directly to a location approved by the department and shall be isolated from other livestock and remain under immediate quarantine until released. Control of biological products, 571-300. A person may not sell, use, or distribute in the state a serum, vaccine, Bactrim, veterinary biologic, or other biological product which is used as a diagnostic agent or used in prevention or treatment of diseases of animals or livestock unless it has been produced in accordance with a permit, authorization, or license granted by the USDA, this department, an agency authorized by the department. 571-310 sub 5, any vaccine, bacteriologic, or bacterial product that could present a hazard to animals or livestock or to the livestock industry of the state as determined by the department. Vaccination of female cattle or bison before change of ownership, 571-355. Female cattle or bison are at least 4 months of age and not more than 12 months of age must be official brucellosis capsid vaccinated for brucellosis before any change of ownership occurs in Nevada, unless the cattle or bison are sold and immediately transported to a qualified feedlot, or out of state. Female cattle or bison that are more than 12 months of age must be official brucellosis capsid vaccinate, OCV, before any change of ownership occurs in Nevada, unless the cattle or bison are 1, identified as spayed females in a manner approved by the administrator, or 2, sold for slaughter directly to or through an approved public livestock auction as authorized by the administrator. Moving down to new 3, entry of adult vaccinates and or adult vaccination is not permitted in Nevada without prior authorization of the administrator. Currently, that is not allowed, but we did want the flexibility if at some point in the future it was deemed safe for a new product, then we wouldn't have to go through rate changes. 571-390, equine infectious anemia. Again, test approved by the department. We talked about that previously. It's just so we can be nimble. Currently, right now, we use ELISAs and AGIDs. 2, scratching blood samples shall be collected by a licensed veterinarian at the owner's request and expense. Sub 3, a complete positive identification of the horse must be made by the veterinarian at the time of blood sample collection on a form approved by the department. All right, now we're on to the trick portion. Again, everywhere that there's just a name change, we're not going to read that. to you guys. So,
Just to clarify back on this one, JJ, that's because the one you just wrote on a form approved by the department, that's because of the electronic.
Yeah.
Right, that we can do now rather than drawing a picture.
So we used to use all the stick figures. Everybody that's had a horse blend for Coggins for EIA is well aware of the stick figures, and those work really well in tracking those horses down. Everybody could draw exact, especially those paint horses. They matched up perfectly. So we are now using a lot of electronic EIA testing, and those are a lot better. They're actually a digital picture of the horse that accompanies that. So it works a lot better, especially in recent cases we've had where we've had to trace several hundred of those out. All right, trick, hold order defined. So again, we had a hold order here, but we're trying to figure out if we have it in statute anywhere, if we're gonna have to make this quarantine order, but stay tuned. Hold order means any order issued pursuant to NRS 561-295 due to exposure or infection with trick. Negative test result means an official laboratory has determined an official test sample to be negative for the presence of T fetus. Official laboratory defined. An official laboratory means a lab that is approved by the department and follows official protocol to confirm by polymerase chain reaction PCR or a test approved by the department, which currently is culture, whether an official test is non-negative or negative for T fetus. Official tag. Here we preferably place them in the right ear of a bull by an accredited veterinarian or technician under the indirect supervision of an accredited veterinarian. Official test for trick defined. Official test for trick means a test for trick that is performed on a test eligible bull by PCR or other test approved by the department, where the sample is collected by an accredited veterinarian or veterinary technician under the indirect supervision of an accredited veterinarian. Positive test result means that an official laboratory test has determined an official laboratory, has determined an official test sample to be non-negative for the presence of T fetus. 18 months, yes, sir.
I was just thinking, we've had a lot of questions
On
as
non-
far as non-negative too, so I don't know.
So you can have suspects on PCR. It'll amplify a little bit and so that CT value is actually in that gray area. We can't call them negative because it did amplify. So they're not truly positive because those results weren't high enough. And if Dr. Forbes wants to weigh in, by all means, he can on this as well, but we can't call them negative because it is in there. That genetic material is amplifying. So that's what a non-negative means, that they're not truly positive, but they're not negative. They're in that gray area. So we call them positive.
Right. They are treated as a positive.
I don't hear Dr. Forbes weighing in, so I'll be good with that explanation. All right. Test chart, and here I did have a note, and Ms. Garrett did clue us into this at a previous one. We had missed a definition right in here of 18 months. And so we will make those changes that a test eligible bull will be 18 months of age. Test chart, again, it's just trick. Nomenclature change, active to intact, as far as sexually intact cattle. So meaning if they're steers or they're spayed, that doesn't apply. Trick defined, registration of accredited veterinarian or veterinary technician to collect samples for official tests for trick. An accredited veterinarian or veterinary technician under the indirect supervision of accredited vet shall register with the department to collect samples for trick testing if he or she has completed a certification program approved by the department. We do have some of those available, so it kind of consists of some online or DVD watching and checking the box. 571-641 annual trichomoniasis testing requirement. Trichomoniasis testing season begins on September 1 of each calendar year and continues till August 31 of the succeeding year. All test eligible bulls entering or located within the state of Nevada shall be tested negative, utilizing an official test for trick annually during the trick testing season prior to being allowed access to female cattle, or by August 31st of each testing season, whichever occurs first, except A, Bulls that are turned out on public grazing allotments shall be tested for trick by August 31st of each trick testing season or 45 days prior to turnout on a public grazing allotment, whichever occurs first. B, bulls consigned directly to a qualified feedlot for finished feeding for slaughter or directly entering slaughter channels are exempt from testing requirements. 571-642. These are prerequisites to movement of bulls into the state, exemptions from requirement. Except as otherwise provided in sub 2, a person shall not ship, transport, or otherwise move into the state any test eligible bull unless the test eligible bull A has tested negative for trick as evidenced by an official test performed on a specimen taken from the test eligible bull by an accredited veterinarian within 60 days prior to entry and has not had contact with female cattle from the time of the test to the import. Sub B is accompanied by a CDI. B1 verifies that the test eligible bull has tested negative for trick on an official test and that trick has not been diagnosed in the herd of origin of the test eligible bull during the previous 12 months. So keep that in mind. If they're hot in the last 12 months, we're going to have other discussions about bringing them in. If the test eligible bull is from a herd that has tested positive for trick in the previous 12 months, verifies that the test eligible bull has tested negative by official test for trick in each of its 2 most recent official tests before entering the state, and that each test was performed at least 1 week apart and complied with official program to test for trick in the state of origin of the test eligible bull. The official test that identified the positive bull in the herd can be used to fulfill this requirement as long as the test eligible bull applying for entry tested negative. So I'm just going to pause and explain what this means again. So if we are importing a bull from a herd in another state and they have been positive at some point in the last 12 months, they have to test negative twice, at least 1 week apart before we will allow those bulls entry into the state of Nevada. If let's say that they test, Dan and Julie test 20 bulls, 19 are negative. Those 19 only need to be tested once more. The 1 bull's out automatically. That is your 2 tests. We're not making you start over on 2 more tests because the first test had a dirty bull in the battery. We're counting those individually. Does that make sense what we're saying? Okay. Not that you're out of state. I mean, that part of Fallon's kind of out of state over there. All right, the administrator may exempt from the requirements, a person wishes to ship, so it's just trick. There again, nomenclature, testing of commuter bull, that is test eligible bull application or commuter permit. We had some questions on this in Elko, so I want to make sure we're clear again. Commuter bull is an out of state. This is a pasture, if you will. So we see these commuter bulls out of state. We see a lot of them from California, Idaho, Oregon this time of the year. They're starting to go back. So these apply to that. By definition, commuter bull and a commuter permit is a pasture to pasture program. The owner or leasing of a commuter bull that is a test eligible bull shall ensure that the commuter bull has tested negative by an official test for trick annually between September 1 and August 31. Commuter bull has received a negative official test result in each of its 2 most recent tests for trick that were performed 7 days apart. The sample for each test was collected at least 7 days apart and tested for trick, same as we were just talking about. Testing of test eligible bull for sale or lease for reproductive purposes. Test negative for trick on a sample taken, so the same rules apply. Within 60 days before the sale or lease. Written declaration required before sale of test eligible bull at stockyard or public auction. Before a test eligible bull may be sold at a stockyard or public livestock auction in the state, the owner or the owner's agent must declare in writing whether or not the bull is positive for trick, except that if the test eligible bull is an untested bull, it may be sold for slaughter or for direct movement to a qualified feedlot or total confinement operation without such a written declaration. Any untested bull originating from an infected or exposed herd is subject to a quarantine or hold order and must first comply with the conditions of the quarantine or hold order. 571-650 nomenclature for trick. Official tags, use, designation, of color, accredited veterinarian or vet tech under the indirect supervision of the accredited veterinarian who collects a sample for an official test per trick on a bull in the state shall place an official test tag in the ear with preference given to the right ear. An accredited vet may tag a bull entering this state with an official test tag if he or she receives a trick test chart from the bull from an accredited veterinarian who tested the bull for trick outside this state. So that means if you buy a bull, lease a bull, whatever it is, and he shows up and he doesn't have his test chart and he has a secondary ID, that veterinarian in the other state can send a copy to Nevada and we'll say, yeah, he is on there with that secondary ID. Go ahead and re-tag him before you turn him out so the neighbors aren't calling and reporting you for not having a tested bull. Official ID, either a metal noose tag, which is the silver bright tags, or an 840 RFID shall be recorded with corresponding official test tag for additional proof of testing in the event an official test tag is lost. Oregon already does this and it does really cut down on that lost tag and confusion. Procedure upon receipt of a test, a positive test result for trick. An accredited veterinarian who is responsible for sample collection for trick on the bull within 48 hours after his or her receipt of the test positive result with respect to the bull shall report the results to the administrative director and the owner of the bull and classify the bull as an infected bull and its herd as an infected herd. The director will immediately place an infected bull and infected herd under hold to ensure that the administrator or their designee or a federal animal health official conducts an epi investigation of the infected herd. Sub 4, trick is a reportable disease in Nevada. That was changed years ago under Dr. LaRussa in statute, and we're just bringing that up into the regs. 571-656 infected herd released from hold orders, lease or transfer of ownership, released to slaughter channel. Each test eligible bull and infected herd tests negative on 2 consecutive official tests for trick within 8 months after the herd is placed under hold order. The official test identifies a positive bull in the herd can be used to fulfill this requirement as long as the test eligible bull sampled for purposes of satisfying the hold order tested negative on that test. Same rules as if you're importing those bulls. Got to have them twice if you're an infected herd. If you have 20, 19 are clean, and the next time 17 are clean, those 17 are cleared because they tested negative twice. Those other 3 bulls go directly to slaughter. Fair? Okay. Each test eligible bull is certified to be clear of trick by official test within 30 days of a positive test. Trick nomenclature, official test, nomenclature. Here's our 18 months. Except as otherwise provided in sub 4, the owner or leasee of an infected herd shall not lease or transfer ownership of any bull or cow or any heifer that is 18 months of age or older from the herd during a period in which the herd is under a hold order. The owner or leasee of an infected herd may consign any cattle from the herd to a slaughter channel. If an owner or leasee releases any cattle from the herd to slaughter channel, the owner or leasee must provide documentation on a form approved by the administrator to the department that the cattle arrived at the slaughter channel. All cattle from an infected herd and entering a slaughter channel shall remain under quarantine until moved to slaughter. All infected cattle being moved from the premise of origin to a slaughter channel shall move on a form or other documentation approved by the department. So there was some talk about using some APHIS forms, and we've got away from that. And so a simple brand inspection that denotes for slaughter only. What we're doing in recent cases of some positive herds up north, we're asking them to have the brand inspector write the trick tag number on that brand inspection, so we know that bull is the one that is leaving, whether they're going directly to a slaughter plant or being sold through a sale barn somewhere. As a condition of release of hold order, the director may require additional testing within 1 year of release. Exposed herd nomenclature for trick, instead of determines that it's identified a neighboring herd is at risk of contact with the infected bull. Nomenclature there. That's all. Each test eligible And the exposed herd receives an official test for trick within 8 months after the herd was placed under hold order and the sample was collected after the possible exposure occurred. If they're determined to be clear, then within 8 months or is released to a slaughter channel. Trick, just nomenclature, the owner, here's our 18 months again. The owner or leasee of an exposed herd may consign any cattle from the herd. The owner or leasee consigns any cattle from the herd. Duties of owner of herd or qualified feedlot regarding bull receiving positive test results. The owner of a herd shall ensure that each bull from the herd that receives a positive test result of official test for trick is identified by a method approved by the department to signify that it is infected with trick. Where this is really going to come into play rather is about having a conversation with you and you know what, we're going to feed him for 20 days instead of turning him out. We're probably going to ask you to go ahead and identify him either with a hot brand or some other form of a tag, something like that. Most I haven't ran into that in recent weeks, but most of these guys are immediately getting rid of these just to get them off the place because we know the bulls don't stay where bulls are supposed to stay. Sub B is sent by direct movement within 30 days after the owner receives the positive test result to a slaughter channel. All infected cattle being moved from the premise of origin to slaughter channel shall move on a form or other documentation approved by the department. We just talked about that. Trick, segregate the bull from all female cattle instead of just breeding cow or heifer. We just thought that was a little cleaner. All right, additional testing 571-662. We struck all of that section out. It was very confusing and we addressed it up above as far as what we need to do for that testing. 571-664, handling of specimens collected from a bull. Use only an official laboratory to test a sample collected by the bull. Ensure that the sample arrives at the lab for testing within a time frame and condition designated by the department as to conduct an official test. We're currently going through a process trying to validate additional testing right now. It's actually going to use tubes instead of pouches. And so we want to remain flexible. Those do appear to be more stable at refrigerated temperatures, not frozen for longer periods of time. So we're trying to get that flexibility out there. So we don't want to nail it down. It has to get there within 48 hours because we have a lot of them now that we can freeze and hold them indefinitely and then send them into the lab. 571-666 official laboratory duties of the operator. We have struck that section out. 571-667 disease animals. Limitations of transport and transfer of ownership. Any owner, lessee, or manager of animals or livestock that are subject of an epi investigation, hold order, or disease quarantine by the department may be denied brand inspections or other services as directed by the administrator or state quarantine officer. I'm going to pause here because this applies to all disease, not trick. 571-667 sub 1 applies to all disease. So if we have something under hold for EIA, such as Coggins, we're not going to let those animals move off that premise. We're not going to give them a brand inspection, and we're not going to give grant any special requirements to those. Now, sub 2, any owner, lessee, or manager of livestock who does not meet the annual requirements set forth in NAC 571-641, that's specific for trick, may be denied brand inspections or other services as directed by the administrator or state quarantine officer. So that concludes the proposed changes to that NAC. We do know that, we did find some errors in the previous 2 workshops, but this was already advertised with this document, so we couldn't make any changes to it. Before we decide what we're going to do going forward, if we do have some more workshops, we will probably clean this up and advertise that document. So we're not working off of the same one that we found some errors or agreed to make some changes on. At this time, it's not public comment, but I'd ask if there's any specific comments or anything you want to dive into anywhere in what we've talked about. Yes, ma'am.
Julie Wolf, for the record. I'm just wondering why 12 months to 18 months. Because I know there's a lot of yearling bulls out there. Is there an issue with them being able to get it?
No, so actually, we are fairly confident that a bull that's 12, 13, or 14 months could probably get it. The only way we can identify the age is 18 months with the eruption of the central incisors. Otherwise, we have to believe people that they're 12 months or 17 and a half months. So that is just, we have a scientific footing, or we open our mouth and we look at it. Yeah, it's 18 months. Other states have gone that same route recently. We started at 8 years ago and 8 months, and that was a nightmare. And then we went to 12, and everybody's saying this. Well, I think we might have went to 20 at one point. I think we went to 20, and then back to 12, and now to 18. So, but that's why.
Is this where we get to ask questions?
No,
Yeah.
we're not gonna answer any questions.
Well, one of the questions that I have going way back to NAC 571.040.
040. Cattle and bison, yes, sir.
Yeah, it deals with the designated surveillance area. Is that defined somewhere?
Yes.
It's not in the regulation that I can see, so does it need to be put someplace where it's identified?
So we could. We could reference that DSA defined, that's defined by those states and by the USDA. And it's actually their geographic boundaries, and they haven't changed recently, but they may, but we'll find that definition and reference it. You got that, Julia? Okay.
On that same paragraph, for that same line, does that include natural migration of these animals out of those infected areas?
So the natural migration of cattle and bison, these are domestic bison, not wild bison, so those aren't migrating. We have no jurisdiction over those. And to be candid, no, they're wandering wherever they wish. They don't always follow the DSA line. And I'll just for a moment add, Dan, that's why we at NDA have been pretty aggressive in maintaining our brucellosis vaccination program. A lot of states are dropping it. It's not that far to the greater Yellowstone area or the DSA in Idaho. And as an aside, I will tell you that I had a conversation with the veterinarian today. Believe it or not, we have commuter herds in Nevada that go in and out of the DSA and back to Nevada. And so we're pretty particular about how they test coming in and out and when they may be exposed.
I was asked by one of our members as to why it is that we don't accept adult vaccinations. And I didn't know what to tell him. I just said,
Because
That's the answer.
so interesting thing on adult vaccination, a lot of these states using adult vaccination use a 1/4 cc or 1 cc instead of the 2 cc dose. And their belief in that is that it might prevent that cow from aborting, because normally when you give a bred cow a brucellosis vaccine, she will abort. She will also become a suspect for life because she's going to test positive on that. And the nightmare that we would have if we ended up adult vaccinating and then we do have a disease break from the DSA or somewhere else and we start bleeding cows, and if we got to go to Jennifer and Lily's up there and all of a sudden, well, these are hitting positive. Well, yeah, but they're adult vaccines. We don't know that. And so we would rather keep it very clean. We think that official cat foot vaccination is still the way to go, even though RB51, that vaccine changed a long time. I was in vet school, it was a long time ago, but from the old strains, we don't get that cross reaction with cat foot vaccine that we used to with strain 19 and strain 21.
in NAC 571.660, you deleted the requirement on hot V land. You cover it from the standpoint of documentation that goes with the animal for sale on that. Is there any intention or need to actually mark the animal as opposed to the paperwork that something needs to be done?
So like I mentioned when I kind of read that part, Mr. Busman, most of these guys when I have the epi investigation and I talk to them, what are you gonna do with the bull? If they're leaving in the next few days, we're not gonna put that hot iron on that bull. And there's a couple of things. They're already getting dang salvage value. So now you put another iron on, which further diminishes some value to that bull down the road for that hide. But they're leaving, and we know they're leaving. If they decide they want to feed that, because they have to leave in 30 days, they have to go somewhere. If they say, I'm going to feed him at home for 29 days and then send him, I'm going to tell them to put a V on him because I don't want him wandering around and the tag's lost. So, but it does say is identified by a method approved by the department. That could include that V brand. That's the discretion we have, and we want to leave in that we can still do that.
Are you going to tag them somehow that they're?
What we're doing is that is an individual number that's in his ear that identifies him as positive. We know what that individual number is. And that's the other reason we're asking for that secondary official ID, the noose or the 840 tag. If that happens to come out, we're still going to be able to cross reference to that other official ID. We think we have it covered.
Is there any place in here that it states where there's any strength to the for slaughter only at the sale barns?
So what I'm doing is when they go in, we make them send a copy of the yardage ticket that we're having them write for sale or for slaughter only, excuse me. And if they're moving on a brand inspection, we're putting for slaughter only on those as well.
Along with that, then, so, or is the livestock auction, is there a set of rules, and maybe I missed it in here, that says if they get a bull that they don't know if it's been tested or not, are they down by any set of guidelines?
So yeah, they are, and it's also that I'm trying to find the section, Jennifer, where we talk about where we have that agreement with those sale barns to receive livestock that would be in addition to this. Those are all spelled out in that agreement. So, and they also have to have quarantine pens, and they can't put any of those animals with cows, for example. That's all in that agreement that we write up with them. And if we happen to go through there, our inspectors that are there on a daily basis say, hey, you know, this guy dropped a bull, and they put him in with a bunch of effort.
Right.
We're going to go down and have a
You don't know
conversation.
what the bull stats.
Exactly. So, and they're pretty careful about it. Our livestock sale guys don't want that on
So
there.
they can't go out because they can't be sold to somebody else for free.
No, they have to have a negative test in order to go to somebody else.
And as far as like on point 648, as far as a rancher sending to an auction, it says before a test may be sold to us, you have to state whether it's been tested. But then it says, except that if the test eligible is an untested bull, it can only go for slaughter. Like for a feedlot. Can it go to an auction?
So a test eligible bull, so before a test eligible bull may be sold at stockyard or livestock in the state, the owner must declare in writing whether or not it is positive or trick. And so if you have to state, and that again gets back to those requirements that you put, if it is untested, it may be sold for slaughter or direct movement. So no, the only way, if it's a test eligible, so under this, if he's 18 months or older, he has to go to slaughter unless he has a negative test. You will not, whether
You
you're
can't
from,
send it to the auction.
no. He has to be tested negative. And we make the out-of-state guys do the same thing. We could have a bull come from Arkansas. Well, I'm gonna use Arkansas, they have trick. From a state that doesn't have trick. We could bring a bull in, we make them test that bull before entry into the state. Same rules apply to you for selling within the state.
Okay, so does it have to be within a certain amount of time? Because if you.
It would be within that.
Or send them in November.
So for
Okay.
change of ownership is within 30 or 60 days. I believe the change of ownership is within 30 days, right? Doug? Yeah. It's written in here, so they would comply under that change of ownership or lease section. And I'll find that for you. If anybody else has another question, I'll pull that up.
But I thought that was for a positive.
No, any bull. Our current requirements, any bull coming into the state to be sold as a breeding animal, it is defined.
No, but I mean, if they're within the state, if you're a producer within the state, like us, can we send a bull to Fallon?
For
Not
slaughter,
tested.
for slaughter.
Okay, so it can go there and it just says not tested, then they just send
It goes for slaughter channels. What you can't do,
Make sure it goes to slaughter.
right, you can't send it down there and say this 18-month-old bull or this 2-year-old bull, he's a really good bull, we just don't like him anymore. Go ahead and sell him to JJ.
Right.
Or you can't sell a private treaty to Woody until he's tested.
Okay.
That's okay. We were talking fast. Yep.
And we could go to Idaho with that one, to the Celia
Oh.
Idaho.
But that I was. And when, and this is off the subject, but when the fur bearing that you can't bring the fur bearing into the whatever it is.
Yeah, we should probably get on.
Just curious, does that apply to the Department of Wildlife?
So the Department of Wildlife actually asked for changes. And I'm trying to remember the exact statute, and it was dealing with chronic wasting disease. And that is, so we put that in. And so they're not importing from certain states now because of that again. And I'll be honest with you, almost every state around us has chronic wasting, so you're not seeing them bringing those animals
But
in.
they're bound by the same.
They are bound by this, absolutely. They're not exempt. And we made that change in statute.
That was in with conjunction. with
It was,
right?
we did it in conjunction with wildlife. We ran that VDR together. And I think that was in the 19 session.
I believe so, yeah.
And just to redefine, commuter herds are only herds that come from out of state into this.
Correct. That's by definition. That's what a commuter herd is.
And how do you guys currently enforce these commuter herds?
So they'll send an application in. We don't have a copy of it here. And they have to provide us with the list of bulls that are coming into the state and their negative test results on there. And I can tell you firsthand, I know the lady on the screen right now, if those bulls aren't on there or those numbers don't line up, I get a phone call or an email and we're calling the state of origin and they have to do it. We will not allow them in without testing. And
People calling you, that's when that's calling with the permit to get a permit number, that's their calling.
Owners actually get these pasture to pastures themselves. So if I wanted a pasture to pasture to Idaho, I'd submit my application, turn it into the state vet's office in Nevada. The state vet in Nevada would go through, verify everything's good, sign off on it, send it to Idaho. State veterinarian in Idaho then has to go through it, make sure it's good and sign off. And then the two states have a cooperating agreement that says, okay, here's your pasture to pasture for this defined set of animals for that year. You don't have to move. We do move. We do like them to move on a CBI, but it makes it a lot easier timing wise for them to go back and forth. And it's seasonal grazing only, and it's only for breeding cattle, and it's for a set period of time. You can't bring them and leave them for a year or two. They have to leave, and we're tracking those as well in the brand inspections. So we know when they leave, and you guys, there's a lot of them up in your guys' country. That
And they have to be within the year there, so it's okay. Now, from the other meetings that we've gone to, that seems one of the hot issues riding to the herd. Correct, with the trip infection?
The commuter herds within the state, not out of state.
Okay.
And we don't have those defined, and that's something we're wrestling with on how we do that. We're seeing the herds that bounce around within the state of Nevada seem to be spreading a little disease around. We're not seeing it come from out of state in. That's not what we're seeing. But and so like in Elko, we had this big conversation on commuter herds, and we were mixing apples and oranges. We don't have an intrastate commuter herd defined, and that is probably something. Well, I don't know how you did it. I mean, and what is a commuter herd? Am I a commuter herd because I go 60 miles from Jigs to the headquarters?
Yeah.
I guess I am.
But see, how do you guys do it right now with I thought there were districts in the state currently that if I wanted to take some cattle from where we are down south.
You have to get a brand inspection or a movement permit, but there's no health requirements tied to that.
It's only brand inspection.
It's only
within
brand
the
inspection.
state across the district lines.
So I
Unless
guess
you're
it sounds
contiguous.
like that could be addressed instead of making the entire state do this mandatory. We figure out how well, okay, commuter herds start with. start on a smaller basis at this point, if that's who's causing the issues.
And that's something we've talked about and we've heard a couple of times, so it's things we will continue to look into. Before we go forward with more blue and red and purple writing.
And then I have another question, okay, for the 51620. So explain that again, it's non-negative, because it like said something about there could be a genetic trait in there, it's not truly a positive, but.
So the testing we're using, polymerase chain reaction, is actually looking for that genetic material from trick fetus. So we don't accidentally pick up the intestinal form of it. And so it'll amplify. So what we do is, I'm really trying to boil this down simple. So we'll take that piece and we cut that DNA up, and then we ask it to amplify certain sections of it. And if it shows up on our test, then we know that that's T fetus. Well, sometimes it'll amplify a little bit. It won't be as high as to say that's definitely it, but there's definitely a piece of genetic material that is specific for trick that amplified. So we're calling those non-negative because there is a piece in there. And was it a dead organism? Was it a bad sample? Did the sample sit for a while? Did they die? Did they start to break down in the pouch before we got them tested? So that's why we call them non-negative. And I'll be honest, I've never, I think I told the story the last time we went through these trick rate things. I've never found an inconclusive bull that actually wasn't infected. And we took one years ago, all the way through to slaughter. He was positive, and I was in private practice. This is just a complete aside. He was positive. The owner argued he can't be positive. That bull can't be positive. He was one of 3 in the herd. I said, he's positive. You had to do something wrong. So we tested him, and I didn't test him. He had someone else test him twice more. He was negative both times. They did not want to kill that bull. I said, you have to. We took him to wolf pack meats, had him slaughtered, and sampled the reproductive tract, and he was positive. So it's there. It's that hard to find sometimes. And the longer you wait post-exposure, the less bugs that are in there. So, and he was inconclusive, and we called him positive, and he said he can't be, but he ended up being.
So JJ, you just said an interesting thing. You said the longer you wait, the more apt you're not going to get a positive.
Yeah, the longer. So there's a sweet spot in there, Maureen, where if you take them out of the cows today, you're going to get a lot of gunk. And this is coming from a guy that's collected a lot of bulls. This isn't coming from the state vet, but you're going to get a lot of gunk. Don't laugh at me. In there, so that kind of makes those hard, and the amplification gets funky. If I was in my ideal world, 30 days after I pulled them out, I'd want to test them, because if you wait a little while, they're not mounting an immune response. But these are some big bulls, and then 5 to 6 year old bulls, those little bugs can get down in there and they find some nice little cribs and some nice little good places to hide, if you will. So the infection's still in there. You're taking a pipette. It's about that long, and you're scraping in there to try to find it in a reproductive tract that's like this. Yeah, and you might have a target area that big, but you're just not able to get that amount of organism in there the longer you wait. If you get really aggressive and do really good tests, you find it. But if you're just kind of going through the motions, you're going to miss them. There's no other way to put it.
So good. Of course, you probably read my letter that I gave to Doug earlier this year. Because I trick tested all my bulls last year in November, which is probably 90 to 80 days out.
Okay.
And every one of them came back negative. But in visiting with Randy, with Dr. Wallstrom, and a fellow who sells minerals, I mean, we've done some blood testing already. And I mean, certainly we haven't been aggressive enough at this point. So that could be one of the reasons why all those bulls came back negative.
It could be. Trick testing is not an exact science, and I'm not going to say that it is. It's you can miss them. I don't care how many you do, you can miss them. But that could be.
But I had like a 40. I don't know. I don't even like to say what I had because it's hard to swallow still at this point, but I mean, the amount was maybe a 48% calf crop this year. I mean, I lost $100,000. I mean, just by, if I'm short 100 calves, that's $100,000. I mean, just kind
Yeah.
of easy math, you know, you can just go that way and, you know, and I've had trick before. I have an idea what it's like, you know, and like I said, if I would have had one positive bull out of those bulls, I would have tested those bulls 3 times.
Mhm.
I mean, I wouldn't have hesitated and I would have told every bull that was positive. Even if he was this much positive, it would have made all.
Even if he was non-negative.
Yeah. You know, but that was my, and it's still a hard one to swallow. And I know for Randy, he's visited with you, he still doesn't know what happened.
Trying to figure out what's going on there.
Yeah. But when you say that many days out, and some of them are older bulls, so you're gonna get, but. You know, I thoroughly believe Randy did a good job of, of collecting. the samples.
That guy's sampled a lot of bulls and he does a very, very good job. There's no,
You know.
and again, we're deviating a little bit from the reg and it was just JJ's soapbox. And if I was king for a day, that's how I would do it. Was a fountain of stiff.
Why did you come up with 2 negative samples? Why not 3?
Well, we went around and around on that. Some states have said 3, some have said 2, and these were conversations you guys had before I was JSB.
And some of them came from, a lot of it is the operations that run outside for the majority of everything. I know JJ and I've discussed that since then too, that for them to bring those bulls in and test them 3 more times, it's just, yeah, they said they didn't have the resources, they don't have the time. It's just, they couldn't do it. So we're trying to find something that, so we can still make sure that we aren't spreading the disease around, but also trying to work with the producers as well, so they aren't tearing up their corrals and cowboys and everybody else continually trying to get those 3 tests.
That's kind of where it is, but I mean, when you start thinking about what the cost is at the end.
Sure. So
You know, and my reason is I had 20 years ago, we had trips. And I lost 8 bulls in that. On the 3rd test, we lost 2 bulls.
mhm.
And they were negative up to the 3rd test.
Right.
And that's why I asked. the question.
Yeah.
You know, to me,
So here's, I'm going for it.
You do anyway.
I know. Some of you guys have been kind enough to come and listen to me talk for the 3rd time now. Thank you, ladies. I appreciate it very much. Some of you have had to because it's your job. Thank you, Julia and Samantha, very much. So there's some thoughts that have been keeping me awake at night, rolling around in my head, and Doug and I've been visiting with them. And you know, this was a request to do something different, and this is the shot we took. By all means, we can continue to look at other avenues. We're not married to this at all. I would rather we didn't have to deal with it, but we do, and we know we do from the industry standpoint. I'm looking at more of a regional thing. You guys kind of hit on it, Lily, you hit on a little bit as commuter stuff too. I think we can get there, but I'm going to tell you right now, the one thing, and it references it in here, that the director may require additional testing within a year. I don't think that's enough. And I think what we're seeing an area hit positive, people test, they get clean. And in 2 or 3 years down the road, it comes back in that area, but they haven't tested because they were clean and their neighbors were all clean in the last 2 or 3 years. So I'm thinking if we're really going to get a handle on this and our problem spots, we're going to have to look at something like, and I'm just going to throw out a number like you're going to test for 5 years and everybody in that area is going to test for 5 years. And if you don't have it and you're in an area that's clean, you're in an area that's clean in the state until such time as you get it, and then those same things will apply. That's something I'm playing with, and I think we can get there. And it's not going to be a simple. Maureen and Dan, you guys run 1 fence apart, so you're both going to test. It's going to be a little bigger area, so we kind of make sure we capture everybody around there that might have a bull walk through 2 pastures or back and forth. And it's going to be for a longer period of time. That's just a thought that's rolling around in my head to get away from the statewide mandatory testing, but get into something very similar to what we do with high path avian influenza or something like that. It's a control zone and you're not coming in or out unless you're permitted, and we know you're coming in or out, and you're going to be under the same requirements as those producers within that control zone. You're going to test for 5 years if you want to come in and out of there. And I'm just throwing 5 years out. I don't know what that'll look like, but I'm playing with the numbers and seeing what we think will work.
So these community pastors, we're not on we're with the awards, and a few others, but those warrant having a higher number as opposed to our main herd is isolated and we don't go outside our tents, but yet still we gotta follow the goal, sure. Just because right there. Would it warrant to have those more mandatory multiple testings on those or in an affected area?
So again, I think so, Dan, in those infected areas, yeah, and that's why I said what I said about it's not going to be a simple fence line contact. If there's any chance at all that there was any exposure in that area, everybody there is going to have to test for an extended period of time, because that's what we're seeing. You guys are clean. You never left your area, but yet this little pocket bubbles up every 2, 3, 4 years.
And I've heard you specifically say NDOW, but I've never heard you say BLM or shirts. In that, so you have no. You prevent.
So in
That's what the trick.
right, with trick, BLM and Forest Service have no regulation with trick, and I'll just tell you that 20 years ago, we were very clear we did not want them having that, and I don't think that attitude has changed. Just based on industry feedback, I don't think that they want the BLM and Forest Service policing the disease program.
So where are we in comparison to other states' regulations? So you do, because I honestly, I have not picked up other states' regulations. You know, whether it be Idaho, whether it be Oregon, whether it be Utah, California.
They're all over the board, depending on if you're a beef herd or not. Idaho's 100% mandatory testing everywhere. New Mexico isn't 100% mandatory testing, but if you send something to sale, it has to be tested, even if it's getting its head cut off, because they want to know where it came from, because they're having such a trick problem. That's how they're tracing back and pinpointing these areas. California's got a decent trick program. Utah's got a decent trick program as well, as far as annual testing is concerned.
Are ours close to their regulations then? Or have we went out and did our own? Because theirs have been used, right? I mean, theirs have been in place for, and what I understand that Idaho only had one trick pool last year and it came from Nevada. That was tested, I guess. I imagine you have to add that to it.
So, right, well, but every bull up there's tested they claim they're tested every year. That's where 641 kind of came from, was modeled after Idaho. And again, it was a request to do something different. So we kind of said 571, 641, here's your annual period. Here it is, 45 days prior to turnout. And yeah, they're more strict than we are.
And if the bull last year tested, wasn't that a commuter herd? They were on both sides of the state line.
One that came, I'd have to go back and look. I wasn't here last year, so I can't tell you. I don't remember. I haven't dug into it.
You know, and you hear things, so you don't know, but, you know, I hear it. I think Randy was the one who told me about that.
I don't know what Idaho had. I didn't look. I could find out from Scott.
I guess it doesn't really matter.
Under NAC 571.667, you indicated that bullet number 1 deals with all animal diseases. And bullet number 2 deals with any owner who does not meet the annual requirement. How do you know whether every bull that a person has been tested?
Well, right now we don't, because we don't have an annual requirement.
Even if you did have the annual requirement, how would you know whether that test was performed on that bull? I mean,
So
if I understand correctly,
Mhm.
that if a bull tests positive, the veterinarians are required to notify you of that positive test.
Mhm.
Are veterinarians required to notify you of bulls that are just plain tested, whether they're positive or negative?
Yes.
Where
Today.
where is that at in the regulation?
So it's reportable disease. It's So that's where it falls under.
Even
Even if they're negative, if they're negative, that's what we're pulling it on, or that's what we're hanging it on, Doug, even if they're negative. We want to know, so we know that they're tested.
I think there would need to be some type of clarification somewhere to make sure that, again, I understand that if the vote rate positive, that's required to be notified. I didn't find where just the test itself required somebody to notify you of anything. So if you're going to, again, I think part of the concern we have over mandatory testing of all holes in the state is whether or not you know where 100% of the holes are and whether or not they've been tested. And so somehow there has to be some mechanism and control mechanism to be able to know that happens. I mean, we don't want it that way anyway, but I'm just asking the question because it didn't make any sense how we would find out in the way it's documented.
And labs are required to send those to us now, negatives and positives as well. I believe we got 2 or 3 today reported to us, all negatives, but labs are sending those to us as well. Outside laboratories, not the ones we run, if they use an outside state lab.
And that was before this was written, wasn't it? It's always been that way.
It's always been that way. As far as I can remember, it was always that way.
Do you have problems with the labs reporting them to you?
We've had some problems in the past with some individuals reporting and reporting in a timely manner, but it's getting better. Labs are really good, and we now have an actual designated email that those come to, and those go to everybody involved, so they hit your inbox instantly as soon as they're reported from the lab. And the reason that they're good that way is if we're chasing it around in an area, all of a sudden you'll get a ping on your phone, and this guy that's just right outside that will know it's been positive or negative, and it helps us keep track of that.
And I know, going back to Doug's question too, I know we discussed in some of the other meetings that we also have the use of the livestock assessment tax. Although it's voluntary, but if we have somebody reporting that they have, 25 bulls, yet we're only getting test results on 10, that's another avenue for us to try and vet the system. It's not 100%. We know that not everybody reports the exact number, or some people miss a year or something like that, but it is another avenue for us to try and help track that.
Well, I think we would probably lean more toward that whole idea of having hotspots and treating those. I mean, in our proposals for changes, we have emphasized the idea that neighboring herds under NAC 571610, that definition would be expanded to not just go with that farm, that it would cover basically the neighborhood of where those, and then once you had a hotspot, you would continue to work out from that hotspot, testing and requiring tests to be done in that neighborhood till you get out to a place where you don't have that problem anymore. I think that the 5-year idea, whether it be 5 years or a different thing, I think that would be also workable. Our whole concern is whether or not Nevada has the veterinarian horsepower to do all of the testing that needs to be done. And we also have to understand how the Department of Agriculture is up to the snuff, being able to do their job. Because we don't believe that the existing regulations have been fully met with the necessary work that the department needed to do in order to make the current existing regulation work. So if you focus where there's a hot spot and you build on that, I think that will establish some confidence that it can be done.
You want to have an argument, you're gonna have to change the subject.
Other than I don't want to try and defend us, but I think, in watching what JJ's done when he was here previously and as interim, and even when Dr. Mitchell was here, they worked the best they could through what we have. I mean, there's no teeth in this. And so they tried, but when we run up against, asking people, were you neighboring, who are you neighboring? And they're like, nobody, or they only tell you half the story. And then we're stuck unless we find out through some other avenue. It makes it hard, it ties our hands on that.
And again, that's how it's been defined, if you define neighboring differently,
Right,
so that if you're in the neighborhood, you're automatically required to be.
Right.
For the testing,
yeah,
that's,
So here's what we're gonna need in that instance, and I'm just, if, I don't know where this is gonna go, if we don't go every bull every year in the state, and we do go a different avenue, we're gonna need some support from industry again, that, okay, yeah, we're okay with this, and we understand we have to do something in those areas. Because what tends to happen, we get the no's, and we come up with a great idea, then we have a workshop, and Doug and I sit in here and talk to Julia on the computer, and nobody shows up and says, that's a great idea, we support it. But we hear we're screwing up.
and I'll say too, I know we talked about it when we were in Elko as well, that this wasn't anything that we came up with. It wasn't just our own. I mean, I know when I came here in 17, when Jim was still the director and stuff, it was, hey, industry's asking for something. They want stronger trick rigs. So I mean, we think we're doing what industry, or we want to do what industry needs. It's not. Our focus is not to be the overpowering government or have our hands into anything. I mean, nobody would believe that of either one of us.
This is the third time I've gone through regulations over my career.
Me too, and I'm not quite as sober as you.
Maybe we'll get them this time, Doug.
We need to get them this time. We have other things we need to work on. Or give me 2 VMOs at $250,000 a year and we'll fix it. Your choice.
So then what do we need to do to help you guys pass some kind of regulation?
Well, we're gonna go back, and Julia's going to give us notes from this one, and we've got notes from the last two. And we're gonna put our heads together after this week. It will not be in the next 3 days. We've got some other stuff we're trying to work on. And then we'll see where we're at and make a decision from there about, do we go forward with something else we've been talking about the last few weeks? But it gets right back to, we've got to hear from you, Maureen. We do. The good, the bad, and if so, this document will change, and everybody's gonna see another version of it, whatever that is. And we want your input, and we'll collect it at that point, and we'll keep pushing. We want to get this done sooner rather than later. It's when I left almost 4 years ago, and I'm honestly back to what I was doing when I left. And I really thought there'd be something else to work on.
And I'll say, I think it helps with, I mean, we get both. We get letters that are in support and saying we want mandatory trick testing. We get letters that say we don't want you to do mandatory. And like Doug was saying, they submitted, some proposed language. Cattlemen's submitted some proposed language years ago. We take all of that. I mean, we'll use everything we can to try and put together to come up with somebody that works for the industry is our main focus.
The goal is to get this through the session, right?
Well, it doesn't have to be session, so that's Julie Wolf for the record. She can't see you, even though it looks like she's looking at you, she's looking at us.
I keep texting her name, so we're good.
So this doesn't have to go through the session. So this is regulatory, not statute.
All right.
But all that said, we have a time period that we need to get these done in. And we're asking for a little grace period here from the commission on, can we continue to keep working on this? And because what we don't want to do is just send something in because we're up against it on time, and it's not what's going to work. And what we don't want to do is start completely over because we've done a lot of work. And so let's keep moving if we can.
Right. And in all honesty, we wouldn't get this through because of this upcoming session. There's nothing that this won't move forward until July 1st. But in that time, we can finish our workshops, we can hold an adoption hearing. We actually have to, the director of the department will have to testify at the legislative commission in December, because we're up against our timeline, and so they have to testify of what we've done, how we're trying to keep it moving forward, so we don't have to start over from scratch, because everybody's put a lot of effort into this. We'd like to see it keep moving, but with, you know, LCB and everything, they're slammed with the session, and so it probably wouldn't be till July 1 before we can move on to, you know, going to the legislative commission to get an approval or an adoption of the language. But that's why we're trying to keep this, just to get the workshops done, go towards the hearing adoption process.
Well, I thought it was gonna be an awfully tight timeline if that was the goal, so.
Leanna Carey.
A few years ago, we had a convention in Rima, and JJ sat on the panel, brought down the Idaho State Vet. And they presented their panel and their information, and they also explained that they have a vet board. Did I say that right?
Yeah, they have a veterinary review board in Idaho.
Then, after all the information was given, we were asked about, do we want mandatory trick? Do we not? And it was almost 70% that we did want mandatory trick. And then there are some loud voices from a few ranchers that run a lot of cattle, but a voice that run 250 head of cows compared to somebody that runs 3,000 head, 5,000, 25,000. Should only be the same loudness. All of our voices should be as loud as the next one. Thank you.
Go ahead.
You're right. I was at that meeting also, but also a petition to about 170 producers with varying amounts of cattle, you know, ownership signed that they were against the mandatory. So there are different ideas out there, and it's a tragic deal, and it scares me listening to these test results, because if you've tested twice and you say then on the third one you get it, that's another scary thing of this whole thing that I wasn't really that much cognizant of. I thought if it's negative or positive, I mean, what do you shake your head like, well, gosh, I had negative, I did everything right. We had trick in the 70s. Yeah. Same as you knocked this out. It's like, my gosh, where's the calves? There's no calves here. They're just calves. And so but you know, it never really gets talked a lot about that. You never expose a bull to a dry cow. We never exposed, we were doing all the wrong things. So now we make sure every dry cow is gone before a bull goes in with those pairs. And we also get rid of all bulls at 5 years old. We just never keep up that on. And knock on wood, it seems to work, but we're this close. I mean, we worry all the time that there could be that empty corral of calves. So it's a tragic, awful, devastating disease. And there's no real good, you know, vaccine or test. It doesn't seem like in hearing this. Yeah, that's with knock on wood, we've gotten away with management, but still, even testing. Look at this, you know, you tested right then, and then what do you have? So it's a tough deal. It definitely is.
And as we talked before, as far as in these, you have your hotspot areas and you're saying, well, gosh, we're getting it clean and then it's coming back in. Well, once you brought up this testing situation, it's like, okay, if I test negative in November, December, January, whenever I test my bulls, then I turn them out, I should be testing them as soon as they come back out of that exposed herd. So you almost should be testing them twice in 1 year, because that might help you determine, oops, I've got something going on here. And I mean, I know that's, you know, but I guess that's something you have to figure out with these regulations. So maybe that should be part of the.
And I'm not advocating more regulations, but if you have every clean bull, you put it on a dirty cow, you're just waiting in your wheels. But you know what I mean? It's
Entire state, if the entire state isn't having a problem. That's where we're frustrated, because
yeah, if there's a problem, clean it up, and we'll be right behind you as far as trying to get things cleaned up. But where there isn't a problem, it just seems the numbers aren't warranting that, you know, you should have to make everything better. Man, Carrie, I just feel that if Idaho has done it with the number of cattle that we have in comparison, they're massive. Then we can do it with the number of cattle that we have. We have excellent ranch managers. And we can get this done because Idaho did it. Thank you.
All right, so I'm gonna, if we have any more specific comments on the rates, I want to ask for those none. We'll get into public comment. We're starting to drift to public comment a little bit.
Okay, just one thing, KJ,
bet.
you said, and I'm not sure that I heard it right, and I didn't take a minute to scan that through here. Is that if you, let's say you have 20 bulls, you test, you have one positive bull, you don't have to retest the other 19?
Yes, you do. They have to be done. So if you're a positive herd, they have to have 2 negative tests
Okay,
under the
so-
proposed regs.
Because okay,
So you have 20 bulls.
yes,
Bull number 1 is positive. He's gone. Bull number 2 through 20 have 1 negative test.
yes,
Then you test them again. That's your second test. You don't have, if that test is positive, you don't have to start over, and you don't have to have 2 complete bull battery negative
Oh, I
tests. The individual has to have 2 negative tests,
2 consecutive negative.
2 consecutive negative tests. That's right. Well, if he didn't have a consecutive, he's not gonna, he's dead.
6.2 and 656 are the same as far as having their 2 testing.
Lily, 642 and 6 what?
656.
65.
Because that's where I'm with her, I was trying to, it seemed like you said it one way for 642, and then it was kind of different for 6.
Yeah, so 642 is if it's been diagnosed in a herd outside the state of Nevada in the last 12 months in order to import that bull. That's what 642 is.
But it applies the same.
It applies the same. It applies the same. 656 is for if he's hot in the state. Yep.
So your same example, the first time you have 20 bulls, 2 are positive, they go through, they're out. Second time through the 18 bulls, you get 2 more positive, those are out, and then are the 16 left, you have to test them again?
You do not have to test them again per the regs. Would I recommend it as your herd veterinarian? Absolutely.
Okay.
Per the regs, you do not.
Right.
But if I have my way, we're gonna see you for the next 4 years. We're gonna see those 16 bulls.
But see, I guess that's one thing though that kind of bothers me is that, well, why don't I stay under the fire, JJ? If those 16 bulls, then keep me under the fire.
That's what he said.
No, I don't want to be stuck.
I'm trying to, that's what we're trying, hopefully we can get there. I mean, that's what I'm.
5 more years or 4 more years, how come you don't just make the regulation that, okay, you have to retest because you had 2 more positives come out of that herd?
So that's actually in here. That's proposed in here as well. That it wasn't in the original language, but it is in here now. As a condition of release, the director may require additional testing within 1 year of release.
But isn't that a burden on the department, an extra burden where you just say, okay, because those bulls that those 2 bulls that came out again, in Jenny's example, when it goes from 18 down to 16, those bulls have been hanging out together. So now there's positive that there's a higher chance that those 16 are gonna have another positive show up and isn't
Or we're hoping that in between testing, we're put on cows. If they were put on cows, it doesn't count. Whoa, stop. One at a time, ladies. Julie, you can't catch this. You guys are talking, the sisterly love's coming out here. I'm gonna separate you two. Jennifer, you come over here. Lily, you go over there. One at a time. Julia's going, oh my God, her pen's smoking.
If those bulls are around each other, can't they transfer to each other?
No. That's sheep. That's different. That's Brucella ovis and sheep. Bulls will not spread T-fetus back and forth. Cannot do it. Nope. No, if you run that, if you test that bull battery and you kick them all out there and you had 1 positive and you tested 14 times, he was the only, they're not going to spread it. That 1 bull is not going to give it to your other 18 bulls.
Okay.
Now sheep are different and they are a different species altogether. No, okay, no. Everything's on the record, it's being recorded. If you want to wait until public comment or later.
Yeah, Gary, I feel that we need to be continually educated because there's so much to it that we forget parts. We don't have a university going around and bringing us the Cattleman's update with the veterinarian education material that we need. We need that. Thank you.
Mr. Bosselman, anything further on the specific regulations?
Because we'll go from this then, basically from the open conversation, then we'll go into public comment. So if anybody has any more specifics on this.
Damn, Julie.
I have one more
Let it go.
question as far as, if we want to, provide comment, after I've absorbed stuff, then it's like, oh gosh, okay, I might have some thought. Am I able to just rewrite a letter and submit it to the department?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, that the animal industry email is probably the best one. Julia gets that, she monitors it, so, but that's the best way to send anything to us. All right,
Making sure. We're good. No more questions on this. I know you're not good, but no more questions on this.
Give it up. It's a start.
and if you think of stuff afterwards, I mean, feel free, you can email me as well, you have my email, so I'm good with that, so. All right, at that point, Julia, I think we'll open up public comment again, if you have any of the other areas or online.
I do not have anything in chat, nor do I have anyone's hands raised.
Okay, public comment for Fallon. With Mr. Bustle.
Again, Doug Busselman from the Nevada Farm Bureau, and again, I want to repeat the contention that we have, that workshops need to be held in person in Tonopah and in Ely in order for producers from that area of the state to be able to give their input.
Any other public comment from Fallon?
Do I get to give a comment now?
You do public comment. You take off your JSB hat.
I just want to say, I do want to say thanks for the input that we've got in the last 3 workshops. And it's meaningful and it's needed dialogue. So I want to thank everybody for the input and keep shoveling it our way.
Yeah, and thank you to Churchill County for hosting and providing a location for us. So if we're good at that, I'll go with the end of this then. Again, we want to thank everybody for your participation today. NDA will take the comments from today under consideration, along with any written comments received during this rulemaking process. Thank you again for attending, and this workshop is adjourned as of 2:41 p.m. Thanks, Julia.
Thank you. Be safe.
Okay.
You guys.